1. Unpacking white nationalism in the Trump administration. 2. The myth of heritage Americans, analyzing racial nationalism in the U.S. 3. DHS uses artists painting without permission. Copyright controversy explained. 1. Unpacking white nationalism in the Trump administration. Opinion: the Trump administration and white nationalism. A picture can be worth 1,000 words. But an image posted Monday across https://www.facebook.com/homelandsecurity/post/remember your homeland's heritage new life in a new land Morgan Weistling / the social media https://www.instagram.com/p/dmgrl1operhc accounts https://x.com/dhs/194487551547785525 of the Department of Homeland Security screams two words in particular: white nationalism. The posts feature a painting by Morgan Weistling depicting a man and a woman in a covered wagon looking lovingly at a baby being cradled in the woman's arms. In the distance, under a blue, cloud-speckled sky, is another covered wagon and the rolling hills of the western frontier. As is often the case with symbols of America's westward expansion and the persistent myth of American manifest destiny, https://www.theculturecrush.com/feature/this-land-is-your-land, everyone in the portrait is white. The caption: remember your homeland's heritage. It should shock no one that such a post comes from an administration that has spent the month since President Trump's second inauguration touting its use of draconian immigration tactics. What else would you expect from an administration that is asking DHS's immigration and customs enforcement agents to conduct widespread raids, building concentration camp-like detention facilities like the so-called alligator Alcatraz in the Florida Everglades, and swiftly whisking immigrants, many who have lived, worked, and helped build communities in the country for years, off to countries where they have no connection or where they face deadly threats? Get the gavel. A weekly SCOTUS Explainer newsletter by columnist Kimberly Atkins Store. Enter email. And yet media coverage of these atrocities, as well as policy discussions and advocacy calls to action, often avoid saying the not at all quiet part out loud. In the eyes of this administration, being a non-white person, whether or not you were born on U.S. soil but particularly if you or your parents were not, renders you presumptively un-American. So why aren't we just calling this what it is? I suspect it has a lot to do with this country's long and tortured history on race relations, and discussions thereof. My 52 years of being black in America have taught me that few things make Americans, particularly white Americans, more uncomfortable than talking plainly about racism in America and the forces that advance it, especially when those forces include the government. Yes, we can dismiss social media posts like this as tone-deaf or ahistorical, as many comments on the post have, and just move on. But closing our eyes and ears to the administration's white nationalist agenda won't make it go away. Especially not when the agenda is being put on full display. The post itself is like historical whiteout, erasing the complex, difficult, and brutal truth of Western expansion. Nowhere does it acknowledge the genocide of millions of indigenous people. https://hmh.org/library/research/genocide-of-indigenous-peoples-guide, who lived in America for thousands of years. Nor the Spanish conquistadors whose search for riches in the American West preceded the Oregon Trail crowd. It also conveniently omits the black Americans who enlisted in Buffalo Soldier regiments, often as an escape from enslavement and post-Civil War brutality in the South, only to find themselves engaged in bloody battles, all in the name of protecting white frontiersmen and their ill-gotten gains. And that is not even to speak of others, like Chinese, https://courses.lumenlearning.com/SUNY-US History 2 OS 2X Master/Chapter/the-impact-of-expansion-on-Chinese-immigrants-and-Hispanic-citizens, and Mexican, https://www.indigenousmexico.org/articles/the-railroad-as-for-Mexican-immigration, immigrants and others who built railroads and other key infrastructure that made the colonists' expansion to the Pacific Ocean possible. The post reminds me of the many Confederate monuments that are still found across the nation. They are hailed, falsely, as an homage to history. But they really are a warning for those in the present. This country has a long history of deciding who the real Americans are, and if you are black, brown, or from a predominantly black or brown country, that doesn't include you. Remember when Trump called himself a nationalist? https://www.politico.com/story/2018/10/trump-nationalist-9266745. This tracks. The post, perhaps by no coincidence, came as DHS touted the recently passed budget's infusion of cash into draconian immigration efforts, including plans to replicate Alligator Alcatraz in other states, and an announcement that detained immigrants will no longer be granted bond hearings. Anyone not seeing the connection by this point is being willfully blind. But who is speaking truth to this in a clear way? Democrats? No. Most of mainstream media. Even academics who are otherwise dissenting to every aspect of the administration haven't seen it. But you can. To your lawmakers. To your neighbors. To your local news organizations in op-eds and letters to the editor. To your neighbors and family. To anyone who will listen. Complacency and silence create fertile ground for white nationalism. Be clear about what the administration is sowing, and do all you can to spoil the crop. Kimberly Atkins Store is a columnist for The Globe. She may be reached at kimberly.atkinstore@globe.com. Follow her at Kimberly E. Atkins, https://www.twitter.com/KimberlyAtkins. Follow us. 2. The Myth of Heritage Americans, Analyzing Racial Nationalism in the U.S. The concept of heritage Americans is a myth that simply does not hold up to scrutiny. Recently, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security shared a tweet featuring a painting of a 19th-century pioneer couple holding their newborn child, set against the expansive backdrop of the American West. The accompanying message urged people to remember your homeland's heritage. While there are numerous ways to interpret this tweet, one interpretation stands out in the realm of American politics. The language used and the imagery presented in the painting evoke a sense of nostalgic white nationalism, a sentiment that has found a home within what was once referred to as the alt-right. Whether or not this was the artist's intention is beside the point. For those familiar with the ongoing culture wars online, the message is clear. DHS cleverly avoids explicit statements, allowing for a level of ambiguity that enables them to dismiss accusations of racism with feigned surprise. They might ask, how could anyone see racism in this wholesome portrayal of our shared American heritage? However, the underlying message is unmistakable: some Americans are deemed more American than others. Specifically, those who can trace their ancestry in the U.S. back several generations are considered more authentically American than naturalized citizens or even the children of immigrants born in the U.S. The term heritage is a significant clue. For those with nativist tendencies, heritage Americans refers to individuals who can trace their lineage back to the original colonial stock of America. Proponents of this idea argue that heritage Americans represent a distinct, American ethnicity, primarily consisting of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, with some German and Scandinavian influences. Interestingly, some also include black descendants of slaves in this category, while others vehemently disagree. Those without this ancestral claim are often viewed as less American. While DHS may not articulate this directly, figures like Jack Posobiec, a prominent MAGA influencer, do not hold back. At a recent Turning Point USA conference, Posobiec echoed sentiments reminiscent of Trump, asserting that New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, a naturalized citizen, is not truly American. He stated, "The idea that just handing someone a piece of paper makes them American is flawed. It's simply not true. He went on to label these individuals as fake Americans, vowing to expose them all. Just days later, Posobiec expanded his definition of fake Americans to include Minneapolis mayoral candidate Omar Fate, tweeting that he is clearly not an American, despite Fate being born in Washington, D.C., to Somali immigrant parents. There is no question regarding his citizenship, although recent executive orders could potentially alter that status. When asked to clarify what distinguishes a real American from a fake one, Posobiec cryptically replied, "Everyone knows what an American is." Both Mamdani and Fate share a commonality: they do not fit the narrow definition of heritage Americans, a term that lacks legal standing and is historically misguided. The notion that early Americans shared a unified culture and set of values is fundamentally flawed. While many colonists were English and Christian, this did not guarantee harmony. In fact, it often led to conflict. The Old World was rife with religious strife and division, and these tensions were mirrored in the American colonies. For instance, Virginia colonists were loyalists to the deposed king, while those in Massachusetts Bay were Puritans who had opposed him. The two groups had little in common beyond their mutual disdain. In England, regional populations harbored deep-seated animosities, and the American colonies were no different. With newfound autonomy, these differences became even more pronounced. In New England, Puritans established a strict, communal society under a sometimes authoritarian government, while the Tidewater gentry attempted to replicate the English aristocracy's hierarchical structure. The Ulster Scots in the Appalachian backcountry, who had long fought for their liberties against English oppression, viewed the Tidewater elite with contempt. Meanwhile, the Deep South romanticized a slave-based society ruled by a small group of oligarchs, contrasting sharply with the Quaker communities in Pennsylvania that promoted peace and tolerance. These diverse cultures were often at odds with one another. The unity achieved during the drafting of the Constitution and Bill of Rights was born out of compromise in the face of a common adversary, yet even that was insufficient to prevent the Civil War a century later. The true cohesion of American civilization emerged from the blending of regional identities during the tumultuous westward expansion, a process that included not just European Americans but individuals from across the globe, from Sweden to Peru to China. Proponents of the heritage Americans narrative would have you believe that America's founding was a straightforward endeavor, rooted in a shared cultural bond and brotherly love among its people. This perspective is a disservice to the complex history of the nation, which is characterized by the significant challenges it has overcome in its pursuit of democracy. While some may dismiss this as postmodern revisionism, the reality is that the United States has always been a multicultural society. It is only through a distorted lens that we fail to recognize the rich tapestry of cultural and political diversity that has shaped our nation. The concept of heritage is a remnant of feudal Europe, where social status was determined by bloodlines. America was founded to break free from such constraints. What binds us together is not a shared history, language, or tradition, but a collective aspiration for prosperity through hard work, rather than being confined by the circumstances of our birth. In this regard, today's immigrants seeking opportunities in the U.S. are as American as those who arrived on the Mayflower. It is those who seek to impose an outdated caste system based on ancestry who truly betray the founding principles of this great nation. Leighton Woodhouse is a journalist and documentary filmmaker based in Oakland, California. 3. DHS uses artists' painting without permission. Copyright controversy explained. Art theft by the government. Painter accuses DHS of copyright violation in Heritage Post. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security sparked controversy this week by featuring artist Morgan Weisling's painting without permission in a social media post about America's frontier heritage. On their official X account, DHS shared an image of Weisling's oil painting depicting pioneers with a baby in a covered wagon, titled "New Life in a New Land." The caption urged followers to remember your homeland's heritage. But here's where it gets problematic. Weisling immediately called out the agency for using his work without consent. On his website, the artist stated bluntly, "Attention, the recent DHS post using my painting was used without my permission." In a since-deleted message, reported by the New Republic, He escalated the accusation to a violation of my copyright and expressed frustration about being blindsided, noting, "It was a surprise to me and I'm trying to gather how this happened." Now, let's unpack the artist behind the work. Morgan Weisling specializes in realistic depictions of American frontier life, transitioning from film and video game illustration to fine art in 1998. And this is where things get politically charged. While Weisling objects to DHS using his art, records show he has ties to conservative circles. He partners with Focus on the Family, a prominent evangelical organization opposing abortion rights and LGBTQIA+ equality, which sells prints of this very painting under the title, A Prayer for a New Life. Their product description frames it as celebrating pioneer resilience against adversity. This wasn't an isolated incident. Just 2 weeks earlier, DHS posted another nostalgic painting, Thomas Kincaid's Morning Pledge, depicting mid-century suburban life. The pattern raises urgent questions. Should government agencies freely use copyrighted art for messaging? Does leveraging historical art imply endorsement of the artist's affiliations? And this is the part most people miss. When DHS uses Weisling's frontier imagery alongside heritage messaging, does it inadvertently align federal authority with controversial interpretations of American history? So we turn to you. Is this a straightforward copyright violation, or does the political context complicate the conversation? Should artists with partisan affiliations expect different treatment? Share your perspective below. We're genuinely curious where you stand on this collision of art, politics, and government overreach.